I'm Katy.
I'm Chuck.
And today we're in Toronto at Folly Brewpub with
Christina.
And Chris.
So we're on a road trip, and this is very exciting. We get to visit all the breweries we've seen on Instagram and Twitter, and drilled all over the beers. And we actually we actually get to try them in person. So this is very exciting.
Yeah, this is my second time here at Folly Brewpub, but the first time I was here, I think we spent about 6 or 7 hours sitting at a table, hanging out with Robin, and ended up talking with Christina and Chris a little bit as they were leaving for the day. So I really like this place. I think it's a really great atmosphere and some really great brews.
So we all have a beer in front of us, which is really great at 11 in the morning. We're 12. I think we're at 12 now, so we're good. Okay.
Yeah, just about.
Excellent. Coming from Ottawa, we see your beer online and on the Instagrams everywhere, and we hear how good it is from all the Toronto people, right? And we're all jealous.
That's flattering.
That's very nice to hear.
We have our breweries, right, which are great. Love you, Ottawa. You're good. But to see what other breweries are doing is very exciting. But we don't necessarily know the backstory about what you guys are doing or how you guys got to be here. We see the pretty photos. We like them. We can.
Thank you.
But I would like to know how you got to get into beer.
Well, I got into brewing and beer because while I was finishing up my undergrad in Ottawa at Carleton, I was feeling a little unsatisfied with kind of academia, and I had a teacher encourage me to study wine because I was kind of interested in it. And that led me down a path to pursue my sommelier credentials, and the more I worked at those, the more I realized that I wasn't very good at serving and very good at food and wine pairing, and I didn't enjoy it that much, but I really enjoyed the process of making wine and the production information that you learn when you're learning about wine in general. That kind of led me towards the idea of making beer because you can make really fantastic beer at home. It's a little bit more tricky to make fantastic wine at home. And that kind of path led me towards making beer at home, and that became a bit of an obsession. And then I ended up working at a homebrew store and found myself working as a brewer full-time from there.
Yeah, my story is kind of similar. It's from a homebrew background. We're both from Newfoundland, so I was drinking everything I could in Newfoundland, and every time I could get out of the province to drink some new stuff, I'd be just sopping it all up since I was 19. I've just been always like the type person that wants to try everything at the NLC in Newfoundland or the LCBO here. And I was living at home in Newfoundland, and I was just frustrated there were no IPAs. Like, right. The first IPA to be commercially sold in Newfoundland was Muskoka Mad Tom, and that was like 5 years ago. So I was just frustrated, and so just out of sheer frustration, I was like, okay, I got to figure out how to make these beers that I love in Ontario and love in Quebec at home. And so I learned to homebrew out of necessity because I wanted big hoppy beers. And then I moved to Toronto. I was pursuing my PhD at the time, and I moved to Toronto, and I found there was a bunch of really, really great hoppy beers, better than the ones I could drink at home, for sale. And then I was like, okay, well, what do I want now? And I found more and more I wanted saisons, and I wanted farmhouse ales, because nobody was really doing those. I couldn't really buy them unless there was occasionally one in the springtime, and then it was loaded with fruit and other stuff, and not like that classic DuPont. And so I started transitioning my styles to more saison and farmhouse stuff, also because I have a small Toronto apartment and I didn't have temperature control. Right. So it was just like, okay, it's summertime, I'm not going to worry about it, let's just pitch a bunch of saison yeast and move on. And so we just started brewing those, I just started brewing those styles, and then when this kind of came along, it just kind of became natural that we could build a brewery without temperature control using saison yeast and using farmhouse stuff a lot of the part, and that's what we were brewing a lot of. And that seemed to be where people were getting excited about beer 2 years ago when we were first starting this. So it all just kind of worked out.
Cool, yeah, so that's how it kind of brings up the transition of this place itself. So we did a little bit of scratching the surface on this. We know it wasn't Folly originally. I think Katy knows a little bit more than I do about what it was originally. But how did this place sort of turn into a brew pub, and what got you guys involved in the transition?
Do you want to hear this one, Chris?
Yeah. So We started out just as home brewers, and this used to be Habit's Gastropub. So it was a really nice local gastropub. It had live music. It had just a great vibe, really great food, really great drinks list. One of the largest pouring whiskey selections, which we still have right now. But we first started talking to them as home brewers and just being interested. We had a friend that was more close with them that was working for another brewery that was talking to them about it, and we kind of all came on board to set up this small little brewery. And so me and Christina kind of took over the helm of that and started really just brewing. The idea was it was a kind of part-time thing. We bought one tank and we bought a really small one-barrel system. And we said, what we're going to do is every second Sunday or every third Sunday, we'll come in, we'll brew a batch, we'll just force carb in the keg, and you'll have 6 or 7 kegs that'll be your house brand. And we were looking at it, and the brewery was sitting in the kitchen, not doing anything all week, and we'd come in every now and then and brew a batch, and everybody was wanting more. Everybody's wanting more of the house beer, and everybody just was more excited about the brewery side of everything, because it's just blowing up. So we slowly started transitioning. So we started that whole process. The first batch came out in 2015.
In February of 2015.
February 2015, we had our first batch of what was Habit's Saison, which is now called Praxis. And we brewed that for a while, and then slowly over 2015, we started ramping up and started saying, okay, well, what would it look like to build a brewery more properly here? And we already had the system, so we decided to stick with this one-barrel system that we had and just kind of turn what used to be the dance floor here. So there used to be, behind us now where we're filming, there's the brewery. And it used to just be this giant open area that was for a dance floor, and there were booths all around. And so we just put up these walls over the summer of 2015 and ordered a bunch of similar tanks to the 2-barrel tanks we had for the Gastropub, and then rebranded in the fall of 2015 as Folly Brewpub.
And so where did that name come from, Folly Brewpub?
We were finding a name for beers or for breweries is the hardest and weirdest thing to possibly do.
I think we spent months and months over different names.
Yeah, we didn't really have like a professional team in to do it. It was more like, this is really
there was no
DIY.
Market research? What's going on? Where was the focus group?
Yeah, a little outside of what we were looking at.
I think we sat at Duggan's Brewpub.
Yeah, we're just down the road at Duggan's, and we were just trying
drinking beers and
hammer out names.
Yeah.
And one of the names that came up was a defunct restaurant that used to be in St. John's called Folly. It wasn't a gastropub. It was a really good restaurant run by some Australian people who had migrated to Folly, and they had chose the name Folly because in Newfoundland kind of slang, Newfoundland English, Folly means follow, and so. We loved that name. We loved that place. It used to be like a late night after work, after school kind of spot for us to go and drink. And we were heartbroken when it closed because the owners moved back to Australia, understandably, to raise their families. But it was always just a great memory for us, and we just loved that name. It's just such a simple, easy, kind of foolish, kind of silly kind of name. But that's the kind of beer we brew. It's kind of foolish, kind of silly, but it's a little more Belgian-y. That's also a Belgian kind of twist on it. So we like the name for a number of reasons and settled on it as the Brewpub name.
And you've talked a little bit about the beers that you brew and the style of beer that you brew. For a lot of people in Ottawa, they may not know exactly what kind of beer that you brew. Like we see here on the wonderful menu board that you can't see, Ottawa people. But I'm drinking one right now. It's really good. But can you explain what kind of beer that you do brew, the types of beer that you brew?
Sure. So we focus mainly on saisons, mixed fermentation, farmhouse, and now we're starting to make pale ales. It's so exciting. But we like to say that we are Belgian influenced or inspired, and American. We used to have a nice fancy way of saying this.
Yeah, it was Belgian inspired, American influenced was one of the ways, but really now we're kind of down to we're a yeast driven brewery. So all of our beers, whether they're a pale ale or a saison or a mixed fermentation barrel aged beer, they're all really, the yeast character is really present in them. So all our pale ales are brewed with Sac Trois. All of our saisons use wonderful Escarpment Lab saison blends, whether they're with Brett or without Brett. And so it's really all of our beers, the yeast character really, really matters. So that kind of American twist on recipes and kind of more Belgian respect for the yeast is kind of what makes the cornerstone of our brewing style. So there's a lot of saisons, there's a lot of farmhouse mixed fermentation stuff, but most of them are hoppy, or most of them are funky in some different way, and a lot of different barrel stuff. We have more oak fermentation space than stainless fermentation space, which is kind of weird.
And you can see that right here. Yeah. What are the types of people who come here? Do people come here for the beer? Typically,
I'd say so. It's a lot of people come, like when you release a new beer, you kind of see the same familiar faces that'll come and try the new beer and then stick around for another beer or two. Do you want to follow up on that?
And I think more so than anything, we're more of a neighborhood spot. Our pale ale is called Dovercourt because we're at College and Dovercourt. During the long weekends, we have people buying cases of it. Really just always trying to be that welcoming neighborhood place where you can come and have a burger and a couple of beers and not just come out for the beer releases, even though we love it when people come out for the beer releases. It's awesome.
So I want to just kind of touch, because I'm looking at the brewery now, and I kind of want to touch on a little bit of the geeky science side.
Sure.
How do you keep the pale ales and the funky yeasts and make sure you're controlling that?
It's a lot of cleaning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of very manual cleaning. We don't have like CIP even. Everything is manual scrubbing and manual chemicals and everything. A lot of work, a lot of very careful sanitization. Like it's a lot of work. And I mean, fortunately with a farmhouse kind of brewery, like you do have that kind of, this batch screwed up, so we're going to call it a funkier version. And it doesn't happen that often, but you do have that kind of out, which is nice. And if the beer's still tasting good and just a little funkier than you'd want, add fruit, add something. You can kind of cover your tracks, and then those end up being the beer people really love. And then it's like, well, that's unfortunate. That's difficult to recreate.
We also have a really great relationship with our yeast lab, Escarpment Labs in Guelph, and they've helped us out a number of times. So when something goes a little sideways in the brewery, we can just send them a message on Facebook and be like, hey, Richard, what do you think's going on? And they're always been amazing and super helpful. And I don't think we would be where we are with our diverse range of styles without that company.
Yeah, the Folly drinking game for anybody listening to this podcast could be every time we mention Escarpment Labs, take a drink. Probably don't do that, because we mention them a lot.
It's pretty. It's a nice place. I love the look of it, but it's still pretty small.
It's really small.
Do you guys have plans for wider distribution? Like vested interest? Can I expect any Folly beers to make it to Ottawa?
I mean, we've been to Ottawa, and Brothers Beer Bistro have been nice enough to pour our beer, which is always really flattering when they even just drive down with a van and pick up our beer. It's a really flattering feeling having somebody from another city across the province drive down and carry your beer up and proudly put it on tap. It's unbelievably flattering. But the plan right now is really sticking with the brew pub, and we have kind of, like, our system's really small. We have a 1-barrel system. We have 2-barrel tanks that we double batch on. We have 8 2-barrel tanks, and then I don't even know how many barrels at this point. And it's kind of just, it's taking away at that size. We brew 4 times a week, which is a lot of brewing. And but we managed to get out of a 1-barrel system, we get about 30 hect on average a month, which is a reasonable amount of beer for a little pub and some accounts and some bottle shop stuff. And right now we're kind of playing with it as a pilot system and using it to fill barrels with really interesting stuff and just really do a lot of really interesting, more focus on the beer passion stuff rather than focus on how big or how rapidly it can go.
So what's the division of labor between you two? Do you guys have different jobs? Does one do one thing, the other does the other, or do you do things together?
Well, our official titles are co-head brewers. Everything is divided straight down the middle, but since we brew 4 times a week, it's just the labor for brewing has kind of found its own natural divisions. So I typically manage wort production during the brew day, whereas Chris plays more of a supporting role for wort production. But then Chris then takes over more of the ordering from our suppliers, ordering, and account sales.
Ordering, we mill everything in house here, so I do all the milling in the morning, I do all the cellaring in the walk-in, I do all the account sales, I do all the ordering for grain and brew planning, and then Christina's more the actual brewer that executes everything and designs stuff and does all the brewery side. I'm more like brewer/brewery operations kind of side.
But when we sit down to design a recipe, we both think about what goal we want, how we want the beer to taste, and it's a very democratic process. It's, I want to express these flavors and I want this type of mouthfeel. How do you think we can achieve that? And we design it together.
If you guys, so you guys both enjoy the same kind of styles of beer, and that's sort of where the influence comes from, or did you guys both bring in, I like this style and I like this style, and sort of mesh them together to come up with the Folly taste?
I think it's a bit of both. My wine background certainly played a very large role in building up our barrel aging program and our barrel fermented beers. We both drink a lot. we love going to everyone else's breweries here in Toronto and trying everything. It's usually what we spend our weekends doing, saying hi to everybody and just seeing what's new. I think that I tend to go for more crispy, crushable, bright, hoppy things, and Chris is a little more enjoys all things equally.
I don't have any style that I particularly like more than any other style. I don't have any style I particularly dislike. So for us, it was more so trying to find a coherent set of ideas to build a brewery behind, rather than just building out and doing like a little bit of everything and not doing some of those things particularly well. Like, you know, it can happen way too easily that you just get too ambitious and you just want to like say every recipe we've ever brewed at home. Let's just try it and do all these random things, and then you start losing focus. And because we're so small and have to do so much labor, we really just wanted to make that mandate pretty tight. So we try to build beers that are pretty acid balanced, which is something that, you know, you usually think of beer as sweetness balanced with bitterness, and wine is more sweetness balanced with acidity. And I think somewhere in the middle there, acidity, sweetness, and bitterness can make something else that's really interesting. And especially in funky kind of sour saison beers, you can do some really interesting stuff with that.
And I think a little bit of acidity plays really nicely in more modern New England inspired pale ales, where you have that real drying that follows through from that nice bright fruitiness and creaminess. So that certainly influenced the way that we approach our new pale ales that we're doing.
We're seeing a ton of barrels, and you sort of mentioned you have more barrel fermentation than stainless fermentation. Tell me about the barrels a little bit. Where you source them from? Why did you get into the barrels originally?
Okay, well, the reason we originally got into barrels is because they're nice long-term storage vessels. Like, barrel character is amazing, and if you get it on a brand new wine barrel, it's unbelievable. But after a couple of uses, it starts to fade away. Really, for us, they're long-term storage vessels. So if we have a beer that's a saison with Brett, and we really want to age it for 6 months or a year, it's not feasible to do that in stainless. So you have these barrels that can let that yeast character develop a little more. So that was one of the main reasons. We just love barrel fermented beers and barrel aged beers. And we got most of our barrels from wineries. They're mostly wine barrels, second use wine barrels. So we've driven out with a U-Haul to Niagara region and dropped down and picked up a truck full of wine barrels. But we've got a lot of them second use, so we have bourbon and cognac barrels right now as well. Both the bourbon and the cognac barrels are like more third use, retired indie alehouse barrels. Jeff from Indy's nice enough to shoot me a text message when he has some extra barrels that they've used once or twice, and they're like, don't have space for, got fresh barrels coming in. So all these bourbon barrels that are right here were used for their Burning Boat barley wine. Before that went in further more bourbon barrels, which is a very ambitious project. Yeah, our cognac barrels are also from their Sunkicked XO line of beers. So it's been really nice that the community is so sharing. Like, oh, I'm done with this barrel. Do you need it? Yeah, we'll take it. And it's hard when you get a text message from him first thing in the morning, and he's like, I got some extra barrels, and it's like, kind of got to take those.
Yeah.
One thing we don't really do on the show is talk about the beer we're drinking. We actually haven't mentioned what we're drinking, so we should probably do that so people can play catch up on what we're drinking. So I'm drinking the Jane the Fool, which is a session ale, which is pale ale, which you were really excited about.
Yeah. So this beer came about because one of the things that I've been very lucky to do here at Folly is do some work for International Women's Collaborative Brew Day and similar organizations that celebrate and encourage women to join the beer industry either through production or sales or marketing or service. It is something that is really dear to me, and I was very lucky to work with the organizers from the Queens of Craft group in Guelph. So that's every March they hold a weekly information session and they bring out industry professionals and encourage women to learn about many different areas in beer, like beer and cheese or beer myths or styles around the globe. And this year they finished out their March celebrations by having a little beer festival. And so they did collaborations with different breweries across the province. And so we made a beer together and we called it Jane the Queen's Fool. Jane was I believe the only documented female court jester. And so they wanted to play up the idea of folly and royalty because they were queens of craft, so that's kind of where that name came from. The beer, we sent a keg to the event, and then we kept some for us here at the pub, and we sold out of it within a weekend. It was amazing. I was super happy with the beer. Everybody really enjoyed it at the event, so we decided to rebrew it here. I slightly tweaked some of the hops and a few other little things, and we decided to shorten the name, call it Jane the Fool. And it's a beer that I'm very pleased with. It's using the Sactois to ferment it, so it's definitely still a very expressive yeast, lots of nice pineapple character in there. It's under 5%, and it's got a nice little hint of acidity in the back, so it's a real good crusher. I'm quite happy with it.
I like the phrase, like the term crusher.
We're big on the crushables.
So happy this morning. But I will say, so one of the reasons why I know you is because you are very outspoken when it comes to being a female brewer and how that may be in the industry. I know I read a blog post, I think, that you wrote.
Yes.
So do you still feel that is something that's perhaps, I don't want to say stigmatized, or still something that's an issue in the brewing world?
It lurks. It's there, but it's getting way better. There's a lot of women working in this industry at various levels. There's a lot of events that promote women drinking beer and trying beer in safe, friendly spaces, and a lot of organizations that encourage women to learn about beer. So women are joining this industry at a very fast-growing rate, which is awesome. But every now and then you come across someone who they kind of feel like a dinosaur because it's not really acceptable anymore to say, oh, you might not like this beer because it's too bitter or too dark or something foolish like that, or oh, are you capable of lifting a grain bag, which someone's asked that to my face before, which is really insulting. But it's getting better, it's happening less and less, and I think it's really important to point out when it does happen, point out when there is a label that makes you feel uncomfortable because it's sexist in manner. Because the more we point these things out and the more we say this is not right, this is not fair, this is a welcoming industry, you start to see it happening less and less because people realize, oh, I didn't realize I was offending you, I didn't realize this makes you feel not welcomed. So in the last 2 years even, it's becoming less and less of an issue, and it's a really nice thing. I think this is an awesome industry with lots of potential. It's growing so fast. There's so many amazing jobs. So the more people feel welcome to join it, it's great.
I'll drink. It's fantastic. So you're drinking.
So I'm drinking the Points Between Hoppy Session Saison, which is also a very, very tasty beer. I think it's crushable.
That was definitely a goal for anything. Most things is crushable. Saisons are supposed to be crushable beers, like saisons and light pale ales. Like that's what we like to drink a lot of. Like we'll do like the oak barrel aged stuff and the stronger stuff, and we want those to be the really exciting stuff. But you're coming to a pub still. You do want to have a beer or two or three. You don't just want to come in and have one little glass of some really high percentage, super funky, incredible saison and just be like, okay, well that's my night.
Yeah, you want people to stay and have another one, so you don't want to have like an 8% beer and be like, okay, bye.
Yeah.
You want them to order another one.
And we want beers for after work too. So like we finish an 8-9 hour brew day that's really warm, and then you just kind of want to sit at the bar and just have something really nice and pale and light. So the thing with Points Between is kind of, I guess, one of more my kind of recipes, where Jane is kind of more yours.
Exactly.
They're a good contrast actually, because Points Between is like a great session saison. We just wanted something else that was light and easy. It's using Escarpment Labs, their New World blend. Old World blend.
Their Old World blend.
We always get confused on their New World and Old World because our Old World Saison is brewed with their New World, our New World Saison is brewed with their Old World, so our naming conventions are diametrically opposed, which makes it difficult for me to remember. But this is using their Old World Saison blend, which is just 2 clean Saison fermenters. It's a really nice, easy drinking Saison. It's really showcasing 2 hops that I love. Hallertau Blanc from Germany, which is just one of my favorite wine-like kind of light Saison hops, and some cashmere hops, which are Ontario-grown cashmere hops, which I hadn't even heard of until Jordan St. John dropped by with some hop samples because he was writing the hop section for the upcoming Ontario Craft Beer Guide, which is now on shelves right now as of filming or recording. Plug for Jordan and Robin. But he came by with a bunch of hops that he wanted to try out in a beer so he could write the ingredients section. And one of the hops he came by with was Dean McConkey from McConkey Farms cashmere hops. And we were smelling through these Ontario hops, and this one just popped out. It just stuck out incredibly. And so, like, the day after, I emailed Dean McConkey and was like, hey, can I get some of these hops? And he drove down from St. George, Ontario, which is just outside of Hamilton. He just drove in to Toronto just to drop off a ridiculously small amount of hops because we don't use that many because we're pretty tiny. Personally to me, and we just wrote him a check on the spot, and that was it. That's the kind of interaction you get with some producers around here, which is so amazing. It really changes your whole week up. And we really want to showcase his hops as much as possible. So this is using his Ontario Cashmere, and we're really proud to be using them.
I just really love the dry finish on this one as well. Just you don't want to stop drinking it. You take a drink and like, okay, when's my next one? I'm really enjoying this one for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I could definitely stay here for a little bit. It's a bit dangerous. Sadly, we have to close up our equipment. But
you guys have anything
on the horizons that you guys want to promote? Any beers or anything like that?
Well, for Mother's Day weekend, which may be past by the time this is...
No,
sure?
This is going right live.
We're actually live right now.
Yeah.
We will be releasing the beer that we made for International Women's Day back in March. We had about, I think it was 10 women join me making a beer this year, all from very different industries. I think only one or two of them were beer industry people. Everybody else were just beer enthusiasts, which was awesome. And we brewed together. We made a table beer. So it's about just under 5%. And this year, the theme for International Women's Collaborative Brew Day was Brew Local. So we used some of those beautiful cashmere hops. I also used 2 different strains of yeast from Escarpment Labs. Drink. And we let it sit in a barrel for a couple of months, and we're going to be releasing it for Mother's Day weekend. It doesn't have a name yet, but be on the lookout. We're really happy with it. It's a very pretty little beer.
And for those listening, though, where can people find you? What's your address, and what are your social media details?
So we're at 928 College Street in kind of downtown, just outside of Little Italy in Toronto. It's just a college in Dovercourt. So if you're getting off the bus at Ossington to go to Bellwoods, for example, you can just stop at College on that bus and walk over. It's like a 10-minute walk from Bellwoods. Because that's like the central hub of beer in most of Ontario right now, almost. So we're really close to those guys. We are on Instagram and Twitter at Folly Brewing, and we're Folly Brewpub on Facebook. So I always forget there's one of those that's different because somebody claimed Folly Brewing on. It was a weird thing, but so But our Instagram is always the one where we are most verbose. I do all the Instagram posting, and so we try to take pretty pictures of what we're doing and write a lot of words about them, and sometimes quite a lot of words about them. So usually the most pure expression of our social media essence is on Instagram.
That sounds very poetic.
And you can usually find us on rotation at some of the fantastic beer bars around the city, even sometimes outside of the city. In London at Milosh's every now and then. We just had a tap takeover there, which was so nice and so much fun.
Amazing.
Yeah. And every now and then we were in Ottawa at Brothers
Beer Bistro, yeah.
and Kitchener Waterloo at Arabella Park. And if there's a few others that I'm sure I'm forgetting.
And then all the regular suspects around Toronto, like Verst, Bar Hop, Beeravolo, all those guys always. Tequila Bookworm, a lot of great spots. Oh, and Lansdowne. Don't forget Lansdowne.
Yeah, and we love those guys, so it's very flattering and lovely to be on tap, to be invited constantly on tap down there. So it's very nice. But it's always best to come to the pub and try the beer here.
Good save.
Well, the nice thing is you can take some bottles home with you too.
Exactly,
so
yes.
That is important.
Yes, we do
Exactly.
have a bottle shop, and we try to keep that list pretty up to date. It's not always everything that's on tap, but it's almost always like 5 or 6 things. So the bottle shop is open whenever we're open. And please drop by and pick up some bottles.
All right, well, first off, thanks very much for having us in here and for a great conversation. We really enjoyed it. And for everybody listening, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at 613BeerCast. And come join the conversation on Facebook at 613BeerCast After Dark. And as always,
We'll talk to you next week.